and welcome to the Science of Learning podcast. Our first guest is Professor Ton Dijkstra. He is a leading expert in bilingualism, and his research spans second language acquisition, cross-linguistic inferences, and the cognitive processes involved in word recognition among bilinguals. He is also a senior researcher at the Millennium Nucleus for the Science of Learning, where I serve as the director. This year, Professor Dijkstra also published a new book, the new psychology of language, from body to mental model and back. And we will be talking about his book as well. Professor Dijkstra, welcome to our show.
Thank you for inviting me, Dr. Ferreira, Professor Ferreira.
Okay. Well, our first question today is about your journey in academia. So I would like to know how you became a professor of psycholinguistics and bilingualism.
Well, this is a question that goes really back a long time. Already in primary school and high school, I was very interested in, on the one hand, topics like biology and physics, but I was also interested in languages like English, French, and German that were taught in our school. And I decided to go and study experimental psychology when I found out that psychology is not just about clinical cases and patients, but also about cognition and perception and so on. And then later I chose language as my research domain in experimental psychology rather than perception or motor behavior, because I felt that language is a unique human capability and it's very complex and layered and also brings in all these other topics in a very difficult, interesting way. Perception plays a role, motor behavior plays a role, but also emotion and decision making and all of those things. And then when at the turn of the century neuroscience came in the form of EEG and later MRI, I embraced those new techniques because it was very interested, very linked to my interest in biology and the brain. Many of the changes that I've seen during my career were driven by technological changes and advances in terms of the research tools that we used. For instance, eye tracking is another example that is not directly related to neuroscience, but we have so many more possibilities for studying language. Virtual reality is one of the most recent domains, and I'm very happy that I'm also engaged in a PhD project on virtual reality and using that in bilingual research.
So are there any questions that we were not able to answer in the past, and that nowadays we can answer with the inclusion of new tools that make it possible to answer these very tough questions?
Yes, I think there are. In the 90s, for instance, when we were studying language, we had reaction time studies as a reflection of what is going on in our mind when we are using one or multiple languages. So the idea was that by measuring time differences in processing, we are able to develop a theory on what's going on in our mind when we are doing particular things. And of course, we could also make descriptions of language behavior. And this led to functional models of language processing that were based on behavioral data, even error rates or percentage correct, but also what people were actually doing in certain situations and measuring reaction times. However, there was a limitation to the applicability and usefulness of the methods that we used at the time, because they all take time. So a lexical decision task is a task, for instance, where you have to say if a particular letter string is a word or not. That takes about 500 to 600 milliseconds, which is half a second. And it may seem very short, half a second, for the layman, but in the psycholinguistic domain, we know that a world of events has already happened within 600 milliseconds. So what really changed around at the beginning of the new century is that by means of these EEG studies and MRI studies and neuroscientific studies more general, we were able to get a finer grain in terms of the temporal processes that we were looking at, because the brain gives direct reflection of the processes that are going on. And we can measure what's going on much more precisely. So that is a change, a real change, because the functional models can now be expanded and extended with neuroscientific evidence.
How complex is that? How our mental, do we have different mental lexicons, or we have just one, all integrated?
Yes. No, that is a very interesting question again. Some people might have thought that when you speak two languages, then you simply have two systems, right? But that's not the case. As François Grosjean has said, a bilingual is not just two monolinguals in one mind or in one brain, because the fact that you are multilingual or bilingual changes the whole system. So the language user framework can be accommodated to account for multilingualism. And the good thing is that the basic assumptions that I mentioned can all be used again. So it's symbolic language processing, there is embodiedness, there is embeddedness, there is incrementality, and there is interactivity. But the interactivity in particular also leads to interactions between different languages. And then the question arises, well, suppose I have a word that exists in different languages and sounds the same and means the same. Let's take the word hotel. Hotel occurs in many different languages. So is this word represented differently for every language? Or is there one representation of it? And what about other words? Are they put together in the same integrated lexicon, so in one database or in many different databases? What about syntax and grammar? Do we have one grammar for Spanish and a different one for English? Or are they somehow overlapping and maybe shared in certain areas where language and Spanish use the same dative construction, for instance? And again, also, we understand Spanish and English to get meaning. Are the meanings different for Spanish and English? Well, I think the easiest to understand is that I'm communicating with you, and this means that even though I speak English and Dutch is my native language, and your native language may be Spanish, you understand English, we can understand each other pretty well. So this has already in the 80s and 90s been considered evidence in favor of a shared conceptual memory.
But I also wanted to give you some space for talking about your book, which is The New Psychology of Language. I have to say that I have it here. The New Psychology of Language from Body to Mental Model and Back. There's an explanation of why you decided to write this book, why we should buy it and use it, especially with our students, and why is it a good book for students and for academics as well?
Yes, well, one reason to write the book is that I wasn't very happy any longer with other books that are around. Some of the other introductions to psycholinguistics have become very, very thick. They are more like Bibles. They are in the 7th edition or so, and they cover every experiment from the past. And they are very good for researchers like you and me, but they can't really teach the basics in one course. And I really thought that we needed a shorter book that is more at the level of the master student or people who are really interested in language. And there are so many reasons why we needed a new book. For instance, there used to be a very big gap between linguistics and psycholinguistics. But now, due to the arrival of the cognitive neurosciences, linguistics and psycholinguistics have come together. And also the educational aspects and the AI aspects, all of those things have become more integrated. And therefore, in our book, we decided not to start with a historical overview, but with the view of researchers at the moment on how this language system works. And by getting this language user framework into the picture first, we were able to then systematically treat the different aspects of language processing. So the phonetics, the phonology, the morphology, the lexicon, the syntax, and the meaning aspects. And because many people who read the book look at these experimental studies, we decided to include a unique chapter on research techniques. Many of the other books don't have a chapter on that.
Your career as a professor of psycholinguistics help you to write this book? Or
Yes, no, you're exactly right. I mean, I was already teaching psycholinguistics when here at Kempen and I developed this language user framework as a basic framework, and I've been using it in my classes on psycholinguistics all of the time. And you could say that the basic framework or basic design for the book derived from my courses on psycholinguistics. I have taught 45 courses on psycholinguistics covering this area of research, both to bachelor students, master students, and also foreign students who came to Nijmegen and participated in minors on language and other topics. So yeah, I had a lot of time to think about what I thought were best studies to describe in the book, and we have made sure that there are older studies in there and newer studies, because we just selected those studies we thought were of interest to the students. But we didn't want to talk about only about MRI studies or EG studies and more recent studies, but we also wanted to show how some smart people were already using the limited techniques they had in the 70s and 80s, and how they were able to do self-paced reading studies, for instance, that were set up very elegantly and led to beautiful results. So the whole book tries to do justice to all these different researchers in different topics: linguistic researchers, biological researchers, people in AI and in psychology, and show how psycholinguistics is the result of a collective effort of people all around the world, older researchers, but also senior researchers, but also junior researchers. And I have always taught my students that even as a master student, you can already contribute new knowledge to this domain, because it's never finished and it's far from finished. So
what recommendations or suggestion you give to people who are teaching a second language, or to learners as well of a second language? from your perspective, obviously.
Undervalued over time. For instance, I've always considered first language acquisition as a very important basis for understanding how adults do language processing. We need to understand how children acquire this language or a second language in order to really understand what adult language users are doing. In terms of the applied sciences and education and more theoretical academic situation, it has been the case for over 100 years that insights and notions from academic research were used in education. For instance, if we look at research on dyslexia and the consequences it has in teaching and in remedies for children with reading problems, there has been a big gap. And I'm happy to say that more and more scientists realize that what they are doing also has this direct societal relevance, and that therefore it's very important to link up the domains. And that's why the kind of communication between you and me is so important, because we need to know what people in the classroom are teaching and how they are teaching, and then provide our services and advice and how that could be improved. And that is really important because, for instance, in using a virtual reality technique, David and I have already seen that some of the strict uses of information in the laboratory situation are not generalizable to a marketplace or a classroom. So in a classroom, very different things play a role at different time levels. We are not talking about milliseconds or seconds, but we are talking about minutes and hours, and there are many different other issues that come in there. So I think that there are projects now that really try to combine the two worlds.